Hello again, bones and ghouls. A quick thing before we get going, since I've seen a fair bit of confusion about the Discord. The Discord is for everyone. You don't need to be a patron to join, although I do always appreciate it. I bring this up because we're doing another giveaway this video. More on that in a sec. Welcome to the Halloween special. I've got something extra spooky for you tonight in the form of a pixel horror game that's actually really scary. After years of waiting, Faith, the Unholy Trinity is finally here. Faith, the Unholy Trinity, is also just known as Faith according to the Steam store page and the executable, but is Faith, the Unholy Trinity, on the itch.io page and in all the New Blood promo videos. It's the final part of a 3-part series of games also known as Faith. Confusing? Don't worry about it. Buying Faith on Steam gets you the entire trilogy and then some more, and Airdorf has cleaned up his itch page to make sure that you're getting the same thing so you're not going to accidentally download or buy the wrong thing. Faith emulates the stylings of 1980s 8-bit video games and nails down that haunted game cartridge look way better than many who try it. Faith is spooky, like spooky. It's one of the few horror games I played where the scares still hit on subsequent playthroughs. I've been a fan of the Faith series for several years now, and was even given a key for Unholy Trinity in advance by the developer, Airdorf. However, as some of you know, in more recent years, I'm not really a fan of getting free keys anymore, and I prefer to buy my games, especially from smaller indies, because their work is worth my $20. However, there was no way for me to properly pre-purchase Faith, so I took this key. To make up for that, and also to further support smaller developers, I am going to be buying not 1, not 2, but 3 copies of the Unholy Trinity to give away in the Discord. You want one? Just click the link in the description and come on down to that Discord channel that we were talking about a second ago. Go into the Knock Knock channel and tell me your best knock knock joke. Bonus points if it's related to Faith in any way. Now let's talk about why you might want to win one of those copies of Faith, the Unholy Trinity. Welcome to the gameplay of Faith. You get 8 directions of movements, and you cannot walk and use your crucifix at the same time. You cannot pivot while you are using the crucifix. You have absolutely no combat acumen, and John's got a bad knee and a latent case of asthma, so this is as fast as you'll go. Your only means of defending yourself in Faith is, well, your faith. The crucifix actually has a pretty good range, but is lacking in its cone of effect, and you're often going to have to be carefully repositioning yourself when enemies are coming at you diagonally. This can get pretty tense, as sometimes you're not going to have a lot of room to reposition, and if a monster gets you, that's it. Mortis. So what do you do in Faith? You find notes, you defeat monsters. Demons and those possessed by the demons, to be specific. Collecting notes is very important. Not only do they give you more of the story, which in turn gives you hints about where to go and what to do next, but also notes will make you stronger against the big bad at the end of the level. Some of these notes are just going to be laying around on the ground, but most of them are going to need you to exercise some cursed stuff in order to reveal them. Possessed stuff is sometimes stuff that's very obviously sticking out from the background, like bright colored stuff, or the very clearly cult related things like altars, but the devil can just be anywhere. IV drips, broken mirrors, rubber duckies, you name it. When in doubt, just point your cross at everything until something happens. While you're collecting these notes, lots of spooky monsters are going to try and get you. Usually, you're going to get some sort of warning or a little hint that something is about to try and jump you, but sometimes Faith pulls a sneaky on you. Enemies are usually dispatched by pointing your cross at them until the evil goes bye-bye, but a few enemies will be dispelled in a single instance of exorcism instantaneously. The real challenge comes from gambling on when you need to position and how fast the monsters can get you. Easy enough with lower tier enemies like cultists, but when the spicier enemies like mini-boss demons or entities that can teleport around get involved, you're gonna have a very bad time. You play as Father John Ward, who is not only plagued with a lack of physical ability as we previously established, but is also susceptible to the influence of demons and generally not on top of things. I mean, look at this. He's neglecting to fix his washing machine back at the house, which is also gonna turn into a mold and possibly a foundation issue if he keeps on letting it go. And also, he has to spy on his neighbors in order to catch the latest episode of Wiggly Dude on the TV because he doesn't have cable. John is very vulnerable, and rarely are you going to have many big wins. You might end up cleansing a place, or at the very least banishing whatever demon is immediately pursuing you, but the most you'll get out of surviving a level is precious information. Heck, sometimes John doesn't even have the option of if he wants to try and exorcise a demon, and it's the best he can do to run away or hide from it. John is almost always behind the 8-ball in this great game he and the forces of evil are playing, and just about any rank and file demon or cultist will very easily do him in. But that's not all that'll get John. Faith is best known for its death screen, Mortis. There's a lot of Mortis in Unholy Trinity, and it's not just the demons. John can get hit by a car, he can get mowed down by police gunfire, or even accidentally set himself on fire. There's a lot of death scenes in this game, ranging from unfortunate accidents to you getting munched on by warped cultists. There's even a couple of achievements centered around Mortis for you to unlock, and most likely one of these is going to be something you get unintentionally, like it just happens because you're going into the game blind. And it wouldn't be a horror game without some puzzles. Since there's not a lot Father Ward can do outside of walking and pointing his cross at things, puzzles are things that are going to put John in a vulnerable position, or the good old-fashioned find a thing in another room to be able to come back and open this door type of puzzle, which at this point I'm starting to think is some sort of secret international law that says all horror games must have these. It's not so straightforward with those though. A number of these involve riddles that aren't too bad to solve, even though there's a clip of my stupid butt pulling up old footage from the original version of Chapter 2 to try and solve the fog puzzle. I are do dumb sometime. There are several particularly tricky puzzles that you're going to need to solve in order to get the good ending, but in order to help you in subsequent playthroughs so that you aren't just wasting your time to no avail, you get a little hint at where exactly the puzzle starts each time you complete a segment at the end of Chapter 3. Then there's the bosses that you will fight at the end of every major level, or pretty much any time if you figure out how to find and confront the optional bosses. Bosses are close to the same as normal enemies, except that they can take a lot more exorcism damage, and they might have a way or two of getting around your crucifix. I find that the main game bosses are pretty easy relative to the optional secret bosses that you need to confront if you want to get the good ending, but don't underestimate the compulsory guys. I died several times to all of them, even the ones I had previously encountered in the demo for Chapter 3. Because while they're relatively easy to the optional guys, they're tough as nails if you don't know what you're doing, especially considering that you have very limited means of dealing with them. The one thing I can tell you on how to make them easier is to remember to always scour the place for any notes you find before coming to the big bad. Even in some speedruns of previous Faith games, runners will go a little bit out of their way to pick up certain notes because the change in damage output is enough to significantly reduce your runtime. Speaking of which, the Faith series has been a speed game since the first two games came out and has even been featured on GDQ for a couple of years. Now, while I've been mostly talking about Chapter 3's gameplay for this part of the video, which is the bulk of the new content in the Unholy Trinity, you also get the first two chapters that used to be standalone games in the Unholy Trinity too. While by comparison the previous two games, particularly the first, are a little bare bones, they're both filled with good scares and are also important to understanding the full story. I even replayed them in my Unholy Trinity playthrough for comparison's sake for this video, not only to refresh my memory, but because these are also revised versions of the first two games. There's also now a prologue to Chapter 2, which is more new content, and maybe something else on top of that if you go looking around in the game files. Now let's get into that good stuff. Faith is a spooky game. It's so spooky that when I first covered the original two Faiths in the original IndieWeen about 2 years ago, I almost missed my upload window for it because it was just that spooky that I had a hard time playing it or willing myself to go to the next game. So how does an 8-bit game that tries to emulate what 8-bit actually looks like instead of what the indie devs from the early 2010s thought 8-bit looks like be scary? It's aesthetic. Faith is seemingly staying true to the original 16-color scheme of the Commodore 64, which Faith aesthetic is clearly emulating, and the lack of color can sometimes make things tense and uncanny. Another place where less is more in Faith's creepy atmosphere is that unlike a lot of pixel horror games, including ones I'm fond of, like the Count Lucanor and Yuppie Psycho, there's a lot of black void in Faith, a lot of empty space. It creates a certain emptiness that a lot of pixel horror games miss out on because they're so preoccupied with filling as much of the screen as possible with more pixel art that looks really cool until the game looks so busy that you miss out on the monsters because you're too busy gawking at the scenery. The 16 color system also makes use of that color very effectively because when you do see a bright color that's popping out, it's usually something like a bloodstain or a cursed item that draws your attention to what's actually spooky in the room. The monsters in Faith are horrifying. You know what else is horrifying? There's a boy jumping on my desk. He's trying to bite the microphone. I gotta pet him. Frisk, Daddy's doing work. Not now. Never mind the Mortis animations for now. Even in their 8-bit forms, the demons and cultists you're up against have got more spookiness in them than most games these days, and I'm pretty sure that all of the pixels in Unholy Trinity combined wouldn't even make up like, say, a tenth of an Overwatch skin, but it's still got more personality. My personal favorite for the spookiness is Mr. Grabby Munchy Boy, who has not one but two ways it can get you. It doesn't even have a Mortis cinematic with it, but when I first saw them, I'd get spooked, and it only got worse because these guys are hard to deal with. Whenever possible, just run around them. Even the normal-ish enemies are scary because they can come at you so fast that it's essentially a jump scare followed by a murder animation. And that's a great segue into the next cool spooky thing, the animations. Now, according to a Google search I did telling me that a Commodore 64 resolution is 320 by 200 and the NES, another contemporary console around the mid to late 80s, is 256 by 240, but these cinematics do not look like something that can be done on either of those despite the chunky pixel look. And they look amazing. They're still clearly pixelated, but the animations are fluid and have a great attention to details for little movements that a body will make in motion. This is because all the little cutscenes, cinematics, and I think even some of the monsters are rotoscoped. In case you didn't know, rotoscoping, as described by the Banner Saga's website, which is another game that uses rotoscoping to make beautiful animations for their games, describes rotoscoping as the process of doing traditional animation, using film footage as a guide. Many people think you're just tracing frames. This is absolutely incorrect. Tracing frames of an animation straight up will look like you trace frames of an animation. You can't just copy the raw footage. That's where the skill comes in. A good animator can take a piece of video footage and make it somehow more believable and dynamic than real life. If the animators are good, you'll often see both hand-drawn and rotoscoping in the same movie and not even know it. It's a guide the same way a character artist might use an anatomical model for reference. This is most likely why, by Erdorf's own reckoning, Chapter 3 and the rest of Unholy Trinity took 3 years to create, the rotoscoping. It's what takes Faith from a good game with some good scares to an amazing game with some absolute colon cleansers for scares. Sure, there's a fair smattering of jump scares, but there's also the tension from when you see a quick animation of someone looking at you and the terror of seeing the monster up close as it finally gets you. And the spooky icing on this already pretty terrifying cake is the music. The first Faith game started out fairly small with its music. It only had 3 royalty-free tracks in the entire game, and it had to make them last. One of the best things about the first installment of Faith was that it knew exactly when to cut the music to drive the tension all the way up. Unholy Trinity still knows when to do this to great effect, but now we've gone from a handful of songs to having a full OST, which is even available for purchase on the store page. Many of the tracks feature phenomenal building of tension that makes you feel as if something terrible is about to happen right as the track hits its peak, and then you think it's all gonna go down in the terrible silence, and then the track starts all over again, and the tension just starts building anew. There's also tracks that feature a ton of little ambient noises in them that mess with you as you're exploring an area that keep you on edge the entire time you're there. Ooh boy, it's anti-sponsor time, and I've got a good one for you today. I was recently approached by some guy wanting to quote-unquote collaborate, saying that he noticed I had a Patreon and that I could get quote 2-3 years of Patreon unquote money from people using their product, aka I sign up for his terrible and exploitative service. This guy wanted me to sign on for something that is somehow worse than the offer I got to do digital prints of my videos that I got a few months back. This guy comes in and wants me to start doing digital collector cards that of course had different tier levels and parasocial perks assigned to them. And of course, they were something that fans could even make money from by selling them later. They didn't say NFT anywhere in the email or on their website, but I did notice when I clicked through to their LinkedIn page on their website that of the 4 of 6 employees I could see, because I actually deleted my LinkedIn account a long time ago because I don't need it and it's essentially Facebook but worse, 2 of the visible 4 had that jack of all trades quote in their bio, and they also had a quote-unquote blockchain consultant. I'm just gonna go ahead and read you my response to their pitch that I finally sent after they poked me with this email for a second time. Redacted. I have seen both your emails now, and I have taken a look at your website. I want nothing to do with you or your terrible product. I am very much satisfied with my Patreon and know better than to open the door to short-sighted greed at the expense of the people who enjoy my videos so much they're willing to directly support me so I can keep making them. And all of that so some middleman can make $1 selling a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. I have perused your website and I find that your product is positively revolting. You have somehow managed to combine the worst aspects of NFTs and abusive parasocial relationships into a horrid little package that sees people as nothing more than piggy banks to crack open for a quick buck. You want to know how I get 2 to 3 years of Patreon money out of my patrons? I make every effort to provide the best content possible in hopes that they find it in themselves to pledge their financial support on said Patreon, and then I keep doing that so they'll stay for years on end. Which they do. While we're on the subject of your product, I would be unsurprised if it turns out that the website you use to try and sell creators on it was reviewed by exactly no one who actually creates and relies on patronage for a living. Your FAQ claims to have over 200 creators ranging from 30k to 3M subscribers, but despite having such impressive sub counts in your client base, you name exactly none of them. In fact, it only took a minute of Googling to find out that the people on your example cards on the website don't exist. Frankly, it's quite strange that none of these 200 up-and-comers want to be the face of your brand. Never mind the tasteless XY graph that blatantly shows this platform only sees a relationship between creators and their fans as a strictly monetary and exploitable one, no matter how many times you say it's for the fans. I am going to give you some unsolicited advice as someone who's been doing this for 10 years now. If you or anyone only thinks about the entirety of a creator-fan relationship as a means to monetization, then they have failed and need to rethink everything about their business strategy. Anyone who goes in to any sort of content creation strictly as a means to make money isn't going to get very far because no one wants to watch a business pitch from an uninspired stranger on YouTube. They want to watch interesting and inspiring videos from people with a passion for making them. The money only comes after you have established yourself as a great creator with a passion for what they do and not a second sooner. Sure, your service might land a whale or two that twists their audience into giving you a chunk of change, but those whales will drop you for the next thing they can abuse their audience with the second it shows up. Nothing you can say to me will convince me that this product is a good fit for my or anyone else's channel. Never contact me again. Charlatan, creator of videos at Charlatan Wonder. As you can see, I would never try to do a horrible thing like pseudo NFT trading cards on you guys because I do run that Patreon over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder. Any support you can give me so that I can keep on making great videos means the world to me. But if you can't or won't, that's totally cool. I still appreciate that you're here watching my videos. Thank you for that. Now let's get back to all that Mortis. Faith takes place in a world based on the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, except now we've got actual demons instead of D20s and guitars and drop D. Father John Ward is a Catholic priest who, for his own reasons, pursues and exorcises demons. Such an occupation takes up a lot of his time, as there's been quite an uptick in possessions lately. This might have something to do with the cult that's in town, made for and ran by a fellow named Gary. We don't quite know who Gary is, what he's up to, and just how much influence he has, but we do know that it isn't good. Whenever we try to ask someone who might know about Gary anything about him, we're told that he's a normal human being just like you and me. I don't know about you guys, but that's not a way I'd expect a normal human being to describe themselves. Alright, time for some minor spoilers as we go over the basic events of the trilogy so that you have a better idea of what's going on. These aren't going to be major endgame plot spoilers, but are still a little on the spoilery side, so I'm gonna put the timestamp here if you want to skip this. John is on a quest to right the wrong he did over a year ago, where he botched his first exorcism on one Amy Martin, causing the demonic presence within her to fully take control, and it ends in absolute disaster for everyone but John. John returns to the Martin household in Chapter 1 to try and finish what he started with Amy, and to also look for clues about Amy's younger twin brothers. Along the way, he's attacked by another victim of demonic possession, Michael Davies. John doesn't quite finish the job on Amy, but she seems a little better than when we last left her. There's no sign of the twins though. In Chapter 2, and its prologue, after a brief segment where Father Garcia is trying to exorcise Michael Davies, John is now at an abandoned church where a similar demonic activity seems to be spurred on by a cult. There's some talk of someone named Gary and a lot of demons and cultists all about the place. The cultists even get the jump on John, and if you look closely, Amy is there with them. John shakes off their curse and makes it to the sanctum under the abandoned tunnels, where he confronts some sort of entity masquerading as a nun with the help of someone who might or might not be Father Garcia. After defeating the nun, John wakes up as if it was a dream. Finally, in Chapter 3, John is now being aided by Father Garcia in order to stop something called the Profane Sabbath, and also to get the truth about Amy and the twins. In between increasingly bad nightmares and flashbacks to the first exorcism of Amy Martin, John is directed by Father Garcia to places where this Gary fellow seems to be doing occult things. After following leads up to the eve of the Profane Sabbath, John discovers the cult's base of operations and confronts Gary himself. We now can't go any further without big spoilers, so here's that warning one last time with the timestamp again. Going, gone. Spoiler time. It turns out the twins were never real. They were just bait to string John along so Gary might try and use him as an alternative vessel for the rite known as the second death, which can create a portal to hell. When we confront Gary, he's kind enough to answer a few questions for us, and in Gary's own words, he's trying to prepare his chosen people for the coming of the Antichrist, which means corrupting them into the horrible monsters you've been seeing all game. He found Amy through the clinic he ran as she worked there, and at first, she was the ideal vessel for Gary's machinations. But after John and the late Father Alred, who was kind of supervising John on baby's first exorcism, try and cleanse the demonic presence out of Amy, she becomes far less than ideal. After a face-off with Gary where he summons a whole lot of demons that affirms he was behind just about everything, it's not John but Father Garcia that finishes the job by swapping out his cross for a 12-gauge Jesus stick. In the okay ending, John and Father Garcia get past Gary and find the chamber, which is the source of all the demonic energy, but they can't get in because the seal of the Unholy Trinity is preventing them from entering and permanently dealing with it. They settle for using a big old stone with holy symbols carved on it to seal off the chamber and essentially put a big long pause on the profane Sabbath, but they have not prevented it. Father Garcia says he's going to war with the unspeakable, the eldritch thing that's in the backdrop of the game art, and most likely the thing that's been behind Gary. To get the good ending, John must not only solve the outward demonic problem in each of the 3 areas he visits in Chapter 3, but he also must find the secret areas in each location where he'll confront an especially tough demon with a direct connection to Gary. These are the things that are hidden in each of the areas the game will show you upon completing a level if you didn't get to them. These bosses are hard, but they are also able to tell you important information about Gary's plans. Gary, who is allegedly a normal human being like you and me, something that we again do not describe normal people as, is trying to find another vessel to bring about the unspeakable, and while Amy was the ideal vessel at first, he's exploring the options after you and Father Alred mucked things up. In order to do this, Gary's got his fingers in all sorts of pies, like the clinic for finding infants for the part of the ritual I don't think I can mention here, the apartment building to house cultists and look for a new vessel because of course an evil cult leader is also a landlord, and the daycare center because why not? Anything to find a vessel. Gary even has connections to Jacob, the antagonist from Dusk, and a third evil figure who is hinted to possibly be the antagonist of the upcoming New Blood title Fallen Aces. If you find all 3 of these secret bosses and break the seal of the Unholy Trinity, after Father Garcia gives Gary a 12-gauge baptism, you can go into the innermost chamber of Gary's temple where you'll learn the truth. Gary himself was the product of the precursor cult to his own, who used the rite of the second death, the thing that Gary needs to complete for his own evil machinations, to bring forth an infant from hell itself. The infant was Gary, who is tasked with finding a suitable vessel for the Antichrist. You now have to go through what is easily the hardest boss fight I have had to do in years, as you learn the hard way that what you and Father Garcia dealt with a few minutes ago was only Gary's first phase. Just you wait for the 3rd phase though. Upon defeating true Gary, Amy appears before John, and John is finally able to finish her exorcism, setting her spirit free. The game ends in a similar way to the okay ending, but now Father Garcia explains that while Gary is gone, that it doesn't solve the problem of the unspeakable, so off to war we go. To get the bad ending, you just have to get out of your car, look around, and go, nope, and immediately leave the scene without doing anything. You'll find that the profane Sabbath is happening, and it's happening in your house too, and that Amy has been inside of the sealed room in John's house. John finds himself taken back to the Martin household, where he kneels before an effigy of the twins that did not exist, and then Amy and Michael Davies give him up to a giant hand that is presumably part of the unspeakable. It's hard to put things in the exact place that they were in Faith's storyline, and I think that's intentional because the game is seemingly intentionally murky about plot details. John is most likely at least somewhat of an unreliable point of view, and while it's about a month between chapters 1 and 3, we have no idea when chapter 2 takes place or when exactly Amy got into John's house, since she was present for the events of chapter 2 in some respect. It's also established to some extent that Amy, or possibly someone else on her behalf, can project her presence into other places, because we also see her in the second part of chapter 3 very briefly. Oh yeah, and while chapter 2 was most likely a dream, we see in chapter 3 that John frequently has dreams that are essentially memories of his past, so we don't know exactly how accurate everything is. There's also the matter of some possible minor continuity tweaks and issues from the original chapter 1 and 2 to the Unholy Trinity. For instance, towards the end of chapter 3, Father Garcia says it's nice to finally meet John, but then what was that in chapter 2? You could possibly explain this as Father Garcia wasn't as detailed as he was in chapter 3 back in chapter 2 because John didn't know what he looked like yet, but then how did he defeat the nun thing on his own? Also, the clown nose thing isn't anywhere to be found, but it's hardly been a week since Faith's launch, so I think maybe someone just hasn't found it yet. Finally, not only was chapter 2's prologue added, but there's also a little thing that got tweaked, which is the name of the woman in the letter who says she's leaving John being changed from Karen to Molly. I looked it up, and yes, the Karen took the kids meme was just starting to pick up some steam right as the original version of chapter 2 was released. I don't know how this is possible, but somehow an indie game that got picked up by New Blood got less memey on release. My final thoughts on Faith, the Unholy Trinity, is that it is an absolute beast of a horror game. If there's one horror game you play this Halloween, make it Faith. It's spooky, it's got cool puzzles and a great art style, and it's a bargain at the price they're asking. Now, since I know some folks are sticklers about this, I'll tell you that so far I've logged just under 10 hours in Unholy Trinity, but I have not done everything yet. I've certainly gotten through all the main content, and there's plenty of challenges left to do, and I haven't gotten all the endings yet. It's also worth noting that my playthroughs of the first 2 chapters of Unholy Trinity are much likely going to be much faster than yours because I was already very familiar with them as I did a video on the original 2 Faith games back in IndieWeen 2019. Chapter 3, the bulk of the new content, took me 2.5 hours on my first blind playthrough, and interestingly enough, took me a considerably longer time on my second to get the good ending because even with my prior knowledge and having a walkthrough on hand for the puzzles to get the secret bosses, since I gotta get this video out in about a week, those bosses are hard and they take a while to learn. There's no gimmicks or gotchas, they're just extremely challenging. One of my favorite parts of playing Faith, the Unholy Trinity, was that through these games, I've gotten to see Erdorf grow and improve between games, and now with Chapter 3, we're seeing him not as a promising new indie dev, but someone who's really come into their own with their styling and game presentation, and has created something that only he can create. Something that's got great horror elements and a distinct style. This is what and I sincerely hope you like to see in the indie scene. Developers who we can see grow through their work until they're consistently putting out amazing games that we just can't get from the AAA scene. I don't know if this is the end of the Faith series, but I'm betting that this is only the beginning for Erdorf. I want to thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I'd love it if you left a like or a comment, and don't forget that I'm giving away 3 copies of the Unholy Trinity down in the Discord, which is free for anyone to join. Bring your best knock knock jokes. If you feel that I have earned your subscription, I'd like to ask you, like I do in a lot of videos now, to please consider also either following me over at Charlatan Wonder on Twitter or again joining the Discord, because frankly, YouTube's subscription system is now unreliable. Finally, if you'd like to help me continue to bring you cool immersive sims and indie horror games through these videos, please check out patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where any pledge gets you early access to videos and there's a bunch of other cool perks. In the meantime, please make sure to stay safe, stay indoors, wash your hands, check your Halloween candy to make sure no one's hidden a Doomwad in it, and please enjoy this cat video. Thank you for watching. Yo, hold everything. We've got a long on the premises. Look at how long this boy is. He even scrunching in his head and all his trunk. He is long. Just how long are you, longer boy? Can I pet? Oh no, I cannot pet. Pets have been denied. I have also shrunk the longness, and he looks kind of concerned. Frisk, are you concerned about the state of your longness? Would you like a smell? Oh no, my meddling presence has deleted the long. And we're not even at loaf yet. We got the toes tucked in like we're ready to loaf. But the back feet are still out. I'm gonna make you roll over. You gonna be a loaf now? kidding me? Oh hey, Torp will do.